Morning, members.
Morning.
Welcome to your first licensing committee meeting. Now, before I start, I'm just going to read out a briefing note, obviously, for the recording, okay, and for your understanding. So, welcome councillors, officers and members of the public to the meeting of Licensing and Community Safety Committee. Reminder, please switch your mobile phones to silent. There are members of the public and press attending this meeting virtually. Can I please ask those attending virtually to switch off? We've got a virtual meeting, have we?
There is virtual one running behind this screen, Chair.
Is anyone present?
Not.
Oh, right, okay, fine. The meeting is being recorded and will be available in due course on the council's YouTube channel. Reminder for councillors, to ensure that those attending virtually and in person can hear the proceedings and for the recording to capture the entire meeting, please ensure that you project your voice and speak clearly. Please remember it is a formal meeting and therefore do not refer to each other by first names. When addressing council, please stand. No, that's council. They didn't stand in this meeting.
Sorry, let's just get that out.
That's okay. There is no fire alarm planned. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, officers will direct you to the nearest exit from the meeting room onto the car park. So, welcome once again. In my opinion, this is the best committee. It's generally the most friendly committee and very productive committee, and ably assisted by our amazing licensing and legal teams and our clerk, Brianna. Incredibly knowledgeable, efficient and approachable. I'm sure Katie, our licensing officer, will, or licensing manager? Public protection manager, sorry. He's going to explain later on how the committee works, but obviously, as well as this main committee, we do have subcommittees where we have hearings, and for examples of those, I'm sure you've read the minutes, there are some examples of our hearings reports in there, so you can get a kind of idea of how it all works. Okay, right, start the official part. So have we got any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. Apologies for absence received from councillors Maskell and Renshaw.
Thank you very much. Item 2, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of March 2023, pages 5 to 8. I've got a mover, do you have a seconder, please? Thank you very much. And all those in agreement, please show.
Thank you.
So everybody. Yes, it's that's fine. You can agree with me if you weren't here. Item 3, items brought forward which in the opinion of the chair should be considered by the meeting as a matter of urgency. I haven't had anything through. Item 4, declarations of interest, please.
I've received none unless any want to be made now.
No, okay. Item 5, to agree the agenda between Part A and Part B. We don't have any Part B, so we'll just continue on with A. Okay, item 6, Community Safety Partnership. Service League Community Safety Partnership Officer, Armed Risk Officer to report. You'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Ferguson. I'm a Community Protection Officer. Part of my role is to work closely with the Community Safety Partnership. So today I want to briefly outline the legislation that's in place for us to work together, and how we work together in our local area, how our local Community Safety Partnership fits in with the wider Devon Community Safety Partnership, and how we work with other districts. And finally, an invitation for you to come and see our work at we base at the Freedom Centre, which I'm sure you know where it is. So, Community Safety Partnerships originated in 1998, so a while back now, following the passage of the Crime and Disorder Act. And Section 6 of this Act requires responsible authorities to work together to formulate and implement strategies to tackle local crime and disorder. So those local responsible authorities are 1, us as a local authority, 2, the police, 3, NHS, 4, probation, and 5, the fire service. Now, I think it's fair to say that in our local area, probably mirrored across Devon as well, the kind of the most important relationship in all this community safety work is between the local authority and the police. And we're extremely lucky in North Devon that we have really really close links with the police. We have a number of officers who've worked in public for a while, and a police service led by the Commander Toby Davis, who's really committed to community safety in North Devon. And as a result, we have, when we used to be based in Brinsworthy, and when we had a police officer stationed with us every day working out of this office, which is certainly unique in Devon and not very, it doesn't happen very often across the country. Now we're based at the Freedom Centre. We do have a police presence, but it's not every day. I think we'd aspire to getting back to that service where we've got police officers sitting with us every day. Now, in spite of them not being with us every day, we've got extremely close relationships, which means we can pick up the phones of the various officers at any time, and we work together, I would say daily, to make sure that North Devon can be the safest place that it can be. So there are a number of different changes to CSP legislation over the years. In 2007, legislation was passed which meant we had to produce an annual strategic assessment. So that's an assessment for the issues we face in Devon. So that might be, I'll come onto that later, what might be. So again, this is done on a Devon-wide basis, and every year the Devon strategic assessment is produced. And it gives a breakdown area by area of issues that we face. So that might be modern slavery, it might be prevent radicalisation, it might be different things. And it gives us a view of what the previous year found and what we can do to, and it gives us ideas about what we can do to prevent, to reduce harm in future year. That's a public document, so it's available anywhere, and I can certainly forward it to Oriana so you can view that. And then the most recent serious change, I think, is the Police Crime and Sentencing Act of last year, which introduced a new duty on the CSPs to work together to prevent and reduce serious violence in our area. Now, this, I think, was put in place mainly to address the serious gang violence in towns and cities where there are increasing murders amongst young people, particularly stabbings, that kind of thing. But it is still helpful for us because it means that we have to work together again with the same responsible authorities, but with the express interest to reduce serious violence. Now, I think from a Devon point of view, the most useful way that we can interpret that is by taking a prevention course. Now, so the idea that we're going to use that duty to work together to prevent serious violence in the future, so amongst our young people. These strategies have got to be put in place by the start of 2024, and we are working again with our Devon colleagues, the Devon County Council, to put things in place to reduce the likelihood of people committing serious violence in the future, with a particular focus on youth. So, as well as the statutory partners of the community partnership that I mentioned before, so that local authority, police, NHS, probation and fire, we have a lot of non-statutory partners as well, which really helps us to get a wider understanding and a wider view of what's happening in the area. So we also have together the Drug and Alcohol Service for Devon. They're part of our partnership. North Devon Against Domestic Abuse are very hard-working and again unique local service that addresses domestic violence, but along with their hostel that they refuge that they operate in town. We also have the Devon Domestic Abuse Service, which is the commissioned service across Devon, and again they play a really important role in what we do. And then also various voluntary services. So North Devon Voluntary Service have different inputs at different times because they are the experts on the ground for particular issues that we might face. So in terms of that work, we also have additional statutory duties that we have to do, obviously. One of them, again, is taken care of by, on a Devon level, which is to commission domestic homicide review. So if anyone is killed by their intimate partner, a review goes into that case to make sure that we can take lessons forward to make sure that things like that don't happen again or minimise risks. And unfortunately, we've had a number of domestic homicides in North Devon over the last few years, and we have, I think, 2 ongoing reviews that we will certainly react to once we get the recommendations. It's a lot of work that goes in, a lot of background to the history of relationships and families happen, but it's really useful work and really important work to protect citizens. The next specific duty is the prevent duty. So that's preventing people who may be aware of the government's prevent strategy, which aims to de-radicalise people who are showing signs that they might be starting to become interested or become influenced by people who want to promote terrorism and who want to promote terrorism and encourage others to commit terrorist acts. And then even in North Devon, we have a number of cases that are going through to a procedure called Channel, where the cases are discussed that we are again represented in. The cases are discussed, and an intervention is put in place for that to that person to divert them away from supporting terrorism. Again, it's often young people or people who are maybe on the autistic spectrum that are featuring quite heavily in that group at the moment. Really important work again to avoid any future problems. And then I mentioned the other statutory duty, the serious violence duty, which I mentioned just a moment ago. So we have our community safety partnership, and we work closely with Torridge District Council across our areas and Torridge. So we have community safety partnership across the 2 districts. But that's overseen really by an organisation called Safer Devon, which is all the same partners, but on a Devon-wide basis, and they're the ones who produce a strategic assessment. And our chair sits on the board of Safer Devon to represent North Devon and Torridge. We work closely again with our district colleagues in different subgroups of Safer Devon, so that would be the Devon and Torbay Prevent Partnership, again, Prevent, as mentioned a moment ago, a serious violence group to make sure that the serious violence duty is adhered to across Devon. The Youth Crime Prevention Partnership, again, that sort of links to the Serious Violence Partnership, but with a specific focus on, again, I suppose, prevention and dealing with the issues that we might come across in our young people. The Domestic Abuse Partnership, again, which does exactly what you might think. It looks at the work that we do across Devon to prevent and address domestic abuse and make sure those victims are as safe as they can be. And then finally, I meet with all my counterparts across Devon to talk about what's happening on the ground, really. So our operational sort of group, which we call the Community Safety Officer Group. Our local priorities are antisocial behaviour. There's been a number of issues and continue to be lots of issues both in our town centres and our villages that we try to address through antisocial behaviour actions and there's a structure that we have to follow in order to address antisocial behaviour, including warnings and prohibitions of certain activities from certain people. Our second priority is serious violence, again, the duty, and this includes domestic and sexual violence that I mentioned before. Drug and alcohol misuse is our third priority, and again, you know, we might not have the same numbers of people who are have issues with drugs and alcohol, but very clearly it's still a real problem in our community. And our fourth priority we call emerging threats. So that could be anything that sort of bubbles up. So, for example, a really good example of this is county lines where people from outside travel into areas like North Devon in order to maximise their drug markets and those associated violence and all that kind of thing. So that's a really good example of something that emerges. Another example might be a few years ago, you might remember before legislation was in place that legal highs were a big problem and there were people selling what were fundamentally unsafe products completely legally, and that's something that we're able to help with. So, just to again talk a bit more about the few issues really. Antisocial behaviour. We have what's called the Antisocial Behaviour Steering Group, which meets on a monthly basis, and that's a 2-part meeting. So we have a pre-meeting immediately before the meeting. And I'd like to invite anyone who has any interest or any issues with antisocial behaviour in their areas to attend that meeting. That meeting's attended by members, by local businesses, housing associations. You're all welcome. And at that meeting, we gather information and we take it to a further immediately afterwards, where we talk with partners to talk about actual solutions to issues. And the link licensing there is that Paul Butler, who I don't know if you know, he will know, the police licensing officer, attends that meeting. So we've got a really good overview of what's going on in terms of licensing and any potential problematic venues or licensed premises. One other thing that's coming up very shortly is that we've got a public spaces protection order that covers Barnsley, Liverpool, which gives powers to the police and council if people urinate in public, beg in an aggressive way, drink in public, where we can take alcohol of people, and just generally, and if people are congregating and causing problems in terms of whatever they might be, we can ban them from the town centre for a period of, I think it's 8 hours, I think. So they're quite important things, and we're just on the precipice of relieving that, and that's important. CSB's the CSB's work is scrutinised yearly by a subcommittee of the OB Scrutiny Committee, and I think that's normally in November, where the chairs and officers attend and are scrutinised by the council. There's a few things now just to add, really. I'm going to be delivering training for members on further training on county lines and modern slavery, which are 2 issues that we face on the 26th of July. And as members, I think that often in the community, these are things that people might report to you or you might see yourselves, and it's useful for you to know to do that information.
What date is that? I'm sorry?
It's the 26th of July. Just for your information, I'm also a safeguarding officer for the council, so it's clearly a big concern between this work and the work of safeguarding both adults and children, and I'm kind of the point of contact for both those issues for you. And finally, all the minutes of all the CSP meetings are provided to this committee when they happen, so they happen quarterly, so you have the minutes there. But as I said, we're more than welcome to attend those meetings. And again, an open invite to anyone who'd like to come to view that was working at the Freedom Centre, which is work and obviously there's the outreach work for the local government community as well there. So that's kind of in a nutshell the work we do. I mean, there's obviously a lot more that I could talk to, but I realise I'm sort of bombarding you with information and stuff. That's that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know if there are any questions around the workings of the partnership rather than so like the issues. Are you happy to take questions, Tim? Yeah, Councillor Can.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, I wonder if we could have emails or notification of those safety meetings and maybe an agenda set through. Is that,
Certainly. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and then it's sort of in our head when they're being held and we can take it upon ourselves if we want to attend them.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Councillor Biederman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim, for that. I mean, I just really comment, Chair, that, you know, urge community members who these are not visits to the Freedom Centre, but, you know, I mean, to get a real grasp of what the Community Centre Partnership does, you know, it not enjoyable at all. It's a fascinating morning if you spend time with Tim and his team, because, you know, it's incredible what goes on in North Devon. I know when I became a councillor, I was in ignorant bliss of some of what goes on in our communities, but it's, yeah, really useful. And I guess we don't want to all arrange to go to Tim on tomorrow, but, you know, I would urge this committee to spend some time with Tim on a one-to-one basis, because I think
Yeah.
learn an awful lot more. I think despite being very thorough this morning, it's, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really interesting because statistically, we're one of the safest areas of the country. Toby Davis, the police commander, will tell you that here we're really looking that way. Well, that certainly doesn't mean that there aren't issues that we need to address. And that's really key, I think, to understand that, you know, we're looking for those issues.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim, for your report. So basically, that's all the report you've been discussing, that's based on the police, Devon and Cornwall police involvement and community safety, antisocial behavior and all this. So did the police make a report, like, because, you know, at the moment, there's police so much shortage.
Yeah.
And that is the number one issue in our community for all this issue, what is being explained. There used to be 300 PCSO, police community support officers at Devon and Cornwall, 150 cut off, only 150, they cover whole Devon and Cornwall. So that is not a safety enough for Devon and Cornwall, the police ways. So that's the raise more antisocial behavior. So I raised that issues because I'm an independent advisor at Devon and Cornwall Police. Also, I'm an IAGLRT member for Devon and Cornwall Police, and I do most of the time I attend in headquarters in police Middlemore. So I raised that sort of issue with the Chief Constable Sean Swear when he retired, and other key officers, you know, all their decision makers, you know. So basically, what I would like to say, like in antisocial behavior, as you know, that in the town area, especially outside of the town area, it's not that bad, but most of the town area. So what is most of the places in town area, there is drinking. Obviously, you're not allowed for the drinking and drugs on the street. But the police are ignore so many things because they need to so many paperwork, because they got short staff. So my question is, so how much the police they report for the council, they get involvement, you know? And I want to know, because of that is very important. I can take this, what you just said, I can take that information, because that's why they do a meeting in the police headquarters. What's the local police doing? You can get against them to report, are they doing their duty properly? And that's the way is to get out all this problem to sort it, you know, because when they're sitting down making all the decision in Middlemore, they don't get the right information, what going in locally. So that's what I want to know, the how involvement the police is. Is it enough? They say that enough community officers for safety for the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think the police will say that they are stretched, as you're probably aware. In terms of the antisocial behaviour, so the council have powers, the police have powers, so we've got that covered, and to a degree, I think it would be useful to have a bigger police presence in town, but I understand why there isn't. I probably should have mentioned that we have a street marshal scheme as well.
Yeah, I saw that now, they start recently.
Yeah, so how that works is that we've got people in town every day to look at any issues of disorder or whatever it might be, or drinking. Now, they don't have the powers to, for example, confiscate alcohol, but what they do is they have a way of alerting those who do. So they're constantly in front of our officers and the police for them to go and deal with it. We have a number of well-known homeless people in Barnstable that are, when I say well-known, they're well-known to both the street marshals and to our the police, and to a degree that they represent the biggest issue in terms of antisocial behaviour in the town. And that can be dealt with quite quickly through the street marshal having eyes on and then alerting the people who need to know. But I think it would be useful to have more police officers, but I think I think the police would agree with that, really.
Yeah, I had a good meeting a few times because often I see Toby Davis and about that homeless people, you know, because they're making a really bad name for the town because we got beautiful town, Barnstable. When people come in, especially this time of year,
Yeah.
when the holiday makers, they come see everywhere, every corner, there's, you know, they're homeless people, you know. So I spoke to Toby Davis because of how we can encourage people instead of giving them money, give them food. Don't give them money because when they're giving money, they're buying drink, they're in every corner. So we've been on the street a few times. I was with him, Toby Davis, but how we can do somehow to, well, public, don't give them
Yeah.
money, give them food if they're asking something.
A couple of years ago, we did a big campaign called Using My Voice Keeps Coming. Spare Change, Real Change. And that campaign was exactly designed to educate the public that, yeah, give food, give drink or whatever, non-alcoholic drinks, I should say. But don't give money because that money will go.
Yeah, of course, going to drug, obviously straight where they're going to buy drink.
Yeah, so we also have in Barnstable, we have in Green Lane Shopping Centre and at the town council, we have,
We got it.
yeah, that you can contribute.
Yeah.
And that money goes directly to Freedom Centre and another local homeless charity called the Compass, you may be aware of, that are tasked with providing services for the homeless people. So it is our intention to rerun that because I think it was a really useful campaign. A lot of people who approached us, we had a stand in Barnstable for a day, and that was useful. A lot of people who approached us already knew that was the case, that the money would go to substances. But a few people hadn't really made that connection, and I think that's really useful to, you know, we don't want to, fundamentally, we want to make sure that people who are homeless or experiencing problems on the streets get out of that situation, and to provide them with money, unfortunately, keeps them there. You know, nobody's interested in keeping them there, both from an social behaviour point of view and or the way the town looks or feels, also from an individual basis for those people. That's important, and I think that what's really opened my eyes, and I think the usefulness of us being based at Freedom is we can see the good work, but the really hard, slow work to get people out of that situation. It's not an easy thing, but we try and do all we can do to make sure that people are inadvertently supporting that lifestyle by giving money, and it's hard. There will always be people who, quite understandably, would say, "It's my money, I can do what I like with it," and give money. But I think it's really important that public are educated in a way that they understand where that money is going to, and it's not going on food; it's going on to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Williams?
Good evening, sorry, good morning. I'm representing Ilfracombe East in particular. Now, you've mentioned the street marshals.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is the correct forum to ask, so forgive me if it isn't, but are we likely to get any in Ilfracombe again?
Well, we had street marshals in Ilfracombe during COVID, and that was really where the inspiration for the scheme came from, really, and that was funded from COVID Relief Fund. The current Barnstable marshals are funded through the Barnstable Save the Streets thing, which is a really successful thing that we had a while ago. At the moment, we don't have any funds really to put in Ilfracombe, any separate funding stream really. I think that might be something that we could look at, particularly during the summer as well, because I think that that's a really important time for Ilfracombe, obviously, but there are no current plans.
Sorry, can I just ask another question?
Yeah.
I understood that initially this was funded by the Crime Commissioner, am I not?
The COVID fund
Yeah,
went to the Police and Crime Commissioner, And then we bid to the Police and Crime Commissioner to get the funding in place rather than.
All right, sorry, thank you for clarifying that for me. I was under a different impression.
Yeah, but the money came from government to PCC and then had to.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for what you do. Tim will pop up every now and then with a bit of training, won't you? I know we've had training on gambling and like I said, county lines, so yeah, we'll see a little bit of Tim over the next sort of 4 years with any updates in legislation and things, so thank you. Thank you.
We can contact Tim, can we? If we need to?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, yes,
Yes.
please.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's, what's your email address, Tim dot,
Yeah, it's on Instagram, but it's Tim.
That was all.
What's your surname?
I'll spell it for you because nobody ever gets it.
Chair, to save an awful lot of time, surely it'd be much easier for
yeah,
Oriana to forward.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, that might be.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll do that.
And my numbers will be there as well, so.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right then, item 7, introduction to the work of the Licensing and Community Safety Committee. Katie Nichols, our Public Protection Manager.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Well, it'd be really useful just, they'll be working with you quite a lot and going forward, just to, get a little brief introduction from yourselves as to which ward you are and your names, because my eyesight, I should actually be on spectacles, is not the best. Can we just go around the room? Is that okay? We'll start here.
Yes, I'm Mark Haworth-Booth and I'm Lanky.
Thank you.
Robbie Melton, Bishop Clinton Ward. Chris Norman, Roswell.
Lee Leatherby, Q Martin.
Convention, Somerton.
We can, Bickington.
Frank Biederman, President.
Thank you. We'll go back round.
Gwyn of Coombe West.
I'm Sue Whitehead, Hampton.
June Williams, Guildford Police Board, and also town councillor.
Said Yusuf, Barnsley, Central.
Julie Hunt Marwood.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's really useful. Just where you feel that.
People.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Yeah, this committee, has, echoed Rita's comments really, is a really great one. And we have done so much good work in the last year. From a licensing perspective, we've had some training now on licensing matters and really perhaps to go back over that a little bit. Obviously that covers the alcohol side of things. So the licensing Act 2003, and we regulate personal licenses. So we've got probably in the region of nearly 2,000 people, I think, on our books that have personal licenses in North Devon. You can take that personal licence with you wherever you wish in the country and obviously utilise that for work within an alcohol licence premises. And then we've got our premises licences. We've got over 600 of those, so quite high numbers, and they're spread across the district. And obviously we've got our areas of Barnstable and Ilfracombe where there's a proliferation of alcohol licence premises, and which include off licences, and also under that licensing act will cover our late night refreshment houses, and so they're the places doing hot food and hot drink after 11 o'clock at night. And we have some burger bands and things like that. So we have some festivals and events which come up in the summer. And we have something called temporary event notices, which I'm guessing you've covered, which is anything up to 499 people and on a temporary basis. And over the years that those limits have increased slowly, so the timescales that you have a temporary event notice have slowly increased. But we probably have in the region of 400 per annum. Prior to COVID, I think we're peaking at 500 of those. So we're a really busy team from alcohol licensing. And then in those alcohol licence premises, obviously we've got gaming machines as well, which will be permitted. Depending on the numbers that they have, we've got places doing amusement with prizes, so the classic sort of penny slot machines and things like that, the first sort of seaside gambling experience that you might have, we cover all of those. And there's lots of different types of permits and licences. We don't have masses of gambling premises, and it's not something as a committee that you'll deal with a great deal, but we do have a gambling policy, and we have an alcohol licensing policy, our licensing act policy, and they're due for review at certain periods. So you'll probably see next up on your agendas a Licensing Act policy review, because we're going to be obliged to get that underway. And also we have an animal licensing policy, which is new, and that's something that we brought online in, I think it was October last year, and we never had one before. We cover things like pet shops, dog breeding and boarding establishments, riding schools, exhibiting animals, so falconry, that type of thing. And we never previously had an animal policy, largely because the legislation is quite prescriptive about how those inspections work, how often we go based on the risk rating. And you'll know that we have a star rating scheme, a bit like when you go and see scores on doors for food establishments, so you've got that star rating. We don't cover the food establishments within licensing. Our colleagues in health and safety and food cover those, but they've got to be registered in those businesses. And there's a massive overlap there, because if you've got a pub that is selling alcohol, even if it's just wet sales, they need to be food registered. And obviously, if they're doing that level of alcohol, then they would need a licence with us, and that's a premises licence. Some of those premises might want to override some of the conditions on their licence. Sometimes they might put in an application for a temporary event notice, if it was a special occasion, a party or something that they wanted to host. And so that can be confusing to the public, because they think, well, why have you gone later tonight? And that's perhaps because they're doing on a tent, perhaps it's because they shouldn't be doing it all. And obviously we have quite an unregulated community with any area of regulation. And so our officers will work and look at those areas of regulation to ensure that people are coming under the scope. And sometimes we'll get complaints about people that aren't acting properly, haven't got a licence, that type of thing. Taxi and private hire is a really important area for us. We have just under 300 licensed drivers, about 200-ish, goes up and down, licensed vehicles. We cover hackney carriage and private hire. I'm guessing in your training, did you cover taxis and private hire? You did. Yeah, I think that's something that once you've had the training, you've got a really good idea of the differentiation between those two areas. But as a member of the public, you ask what's the difference between a private hire and a hackney carriage or taxi, I think there's probably quite little understanding there. And over the years, there's been quite a number of reviews in terms of the legislation. The Law Commission sought to try and review that. It never really has got there, albeit that the DFT brought out some guidance. We had to really look carefully at our licensing policy on taxis and make quite a number of changes. So our taxi policy today is so much improved than it was perhaps a year or so ago, with the hard work of members and lots of consultation with the public and the trade. And we're in a position where we've got a really good policy basis now. We've got really good convictions policy associated with that, and we are in a position where we can say that we've gained a really good level of compliance with the DFT sort of guidance to local authorities on those matters. So that's really nice and a real positive, actually. There's been a lot of hard work in the last year or so. And obviously there's lots of areas that we cover that perhaps we don't even have any licences. If we had applications, we would have to licence boats and boat persons. And so we've got an area of categorised water. So if you kind of drew a line from Instow to Skirm, anything inside there, if we got an application for someone that wanted to hire out pedalos or a boat or something like that, then we would have to cover that. We've got no one doing that. And it would also cover kind of inlands, waterways and things, which obviously is not something that we have a great deal of. Some of the licensing authorities will do. Sex shops, sex establishments, SEVs, the board of sexual entertainment venues, so lap dancing clubs and stuff like that. We would have to cover, don't have any of those that are licensed. And if you are a pub, there are a number of exemptions that can be afforded to them to provide a level of nudity over a certain number of occasions in the year. That's something the committee, we have a policy surrounding. It's coming up due for review as well, so that's something that you might see in the agendas. scrap metal collectors and dealers, obviously we covered those, and the legislation, there's a massive thrust with that, largely because everyone kept stealing metal from everywhere, the prices skyrocketed, and the government put in a regime to ensure that people are appropriately regulated through the licensing regime. That's calmed down a little bit now, perhaps less interest than there was, largely because scrap metal prices perhaps aren't as high as they used to be, albeit they still remain buoyant, and it's an important area of regulation for us. What I wanted to show you is our website. A lot of the stuff that I just covered is on our website, and if you have queries from members of the public, you might want to kind of put them to the website in the first instance, because it's a really helpful one. And if you're ever on there and you notice something that doesn't seem quite right, or you think could be improved, we're always keen to work on the website to ensure that it's kept up to date. So this is our homepage, our new landing page, and if you scroll down to business, you can click on licenses and permits there. And this brings up all the different areas of regulation, licenses, and what we should note is that we have a public register. So if you ever had a query as to who's got a license, who hasn't, and you wanted to have a little check, then you can do. Click on that public register and it'll take you straight there, and you can then narrow that down to the different areas. One of the areas that we cover is skin piercing. Used to be solely just the earlobe. Obviously, as things kind of evolved, it will cover any part of the body in terms of ear piercing. It also cover the semi-permanent makeup that you see ladies have sometimes, the micro kind of bleeding of eyebrows and the eyeliner, lip liners that people have, things like tattooing. We don't cover the tattoo removal, which is obviously a growing area because it's been a massive increase with tattooing, and we've had a huge surge in people wanting to apply for registration. It's not actually a licence. There's been a lot of lobbying to the government to try and change that, because obviously it's a massive growth area. So you can click on any one of these areas. Let's do licensing premises by way of example. And then you can search that register, and you can search by your ward. See the total number of places in an area. There we go, search by Hentons. You can do it that way, or you can search in another fashion, depending on what you're looking at. You can obviously type in the premises name and take you straight to it. That's a useful function. If you can't find what you're looking for and you're unsure, just give us a ring if you've got any concern about it somewhere. So going back to the landing page then, if you click on entertainment and alcohol licensing, you've got some information to those premises on how they would make applications. So all the applications on how they would apply, how they'd make a variation, perhaps they would want to change their designated premises supervisor. That has to be in place where you've got an alcohol licence premises, not for a club, only for an alcohol licence, how they might transfer, all those types of forms are on there. And with open applications, obviously we can make a representation. Representations can be received from members of the public. So if people want to make a representation, we have come up with a short form to enable members of the public to put in their comments about an application, and we try and guide people, because obviously the representations people make have got to be relevant ones. Within the Licensing Act is really very prescriptive in terms of how it works, timescales and so on, and we are constantly chasing legal deadlines on things. We're a really busy team. We don't have many of us. For those that came around the office, as myself, my colleague Phil Fitzsimons, who's a licensing officer, who works alongside Noel Buck. He used to be one of the police officers that you were told about earlier, and we managed to recruit him after his retirement, which has been amazing, because the level of experience that he has in PACE interviews has been absolutely, hugely advantageous to the team. Been able to really up our enforcement game. He's been a really good addition in terms of some of the work that we've done in the last year. We have revoked 9 taxi driver licences for various reasons, some of which included drug use and so on. And so that has been an amazing addition to the team. So as a question, councillors.
Could I just ask a question about this? Obviously, wearing up for Town Council's hat. We had, I'm chair of planning.
Yeah.
We had an application come to us for a premises licence in respect to a premises in Ilfracombe, obviously.
Yes.
We made comment, I don't know what form we used, but we made a comment with regards to this, and it was treated as an objection. So could you tell me what we did wrong, if we did anything wrong? Obviously, I'm not familiar with your forms.
Yeah, you don't have to, if you want to put in a representation to a premises licence application, you don't have to use a form. But what we found is there's a lot of individuals that were putting comments, but I really don't think they should have a licence. The guys are a bit dodgy or, something like that.
Yeah.
And actually then there was this tenuous link to actually whether that was a relevant representation under the Licensing Act, because the objectives under the Licensing Act are to prevent crime and disorder, public safety, prevent public nuisance, and to protect children from harm. So unless that's encompassed within the representation, we can't treat it as a valid representation. So you don't have to use the form, but it's there to help guide people as to what they might want to kind of direct us to in terms of that being relevant. If there are comments and they're relevant to one of the objectives, so if there was a comment in respect to the premises licence, well, actually, we're worried about this constituting kind of a crime and disorder because of X and Y, then the council, if that was made during that representation period, would have treated that as a relevant representation because of the nature of the comments that were made within it. So maybe that's why. But I can help on that if you want to take that.
Can I just chat with you after?
Yes, of course. Yeah, more than happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So like with the Gambling Act, there are also licensing objectives within that, and they're very much similar to this, but they also include protection of vulnerable adults as well as the children. So they're slightly worded differently, and it talks a little bit about ensuring gambling is fair and open. So if there are comments like that within that representation period, you could find yourself in the same boat. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm more than happy to have a chat. So yeah, we've designed that form which helps people making a representation, and on there we've got our licensing policies. I talked about this cyclical programme, so we always seem to be reviewing a policy at some stage. The Licensing Act one was a January 2009 document, now due for review, as I said, 2023 in the January, that one came into effect after approval in October last year, and we've got a happy policy that was done last year. So anything related to gambling, happy carriage, animal licensing is within here in terms of our policies. They're all in one spot. So going back, we've got how to apply for a temporary event notice and a little bit like the guidance about what is a temporary event notice. We often get questions about those, largely because there's lots of timescales associated within the legislation, and there's lots of guidance notes on our website about, what they are, how many people you can have at an event and so on, because small outdoor events and festival type things, village fetes and the like, are quite popular, particularly in summer months. So yeah, any guidance that we have is on there. Right, so going back to the landing page. Cable licences is another area that we cover. bit of an odd one, this. It came under us during COVID, and it was the Business and Planning Act that introduced this measure. And it's for tables and chairs outside of a premises. Doesn't have to be a licensed one. A hairdresser could apply, a cafe, so on and so forth. We get a number of those applications, and we can only charge £100 in terms of a fee for them. There's a little bit of work there, A, to check that it's actually a highway, and B, to make sure that people can get through. So whether it's tables and chairs, and the proposal is that make sure that, you know, wheelchair users and so on can move through that area. It's something that will last until the end of September this year, and then we're not sure what will happen with it. Alongside this temporary kind of more streamlined light touch process is the Highway Act Section 115E process that Devon County Council deal with. And the irony with this, and it's something that drives me a little bit bonkers, that you walk down the street, you have table licences or payment licences either side, one that is dealt with by Devon County and the other side that anyone can come through us. Two different enforcing authorities, and we're dealing with things in a slightly different way. So it would be really good to ensure when that time period comes at the end of September that this is something that we look at quite closely, because you can have a situation where there's a level of inequality in terms of enforcement finding. We've got a little bit of money by way of new burden payment. It's only £3 per pound, but it's a little bit of money. I'm hoping to liaise with county to try and resolve some of these issues, because we went out in the week, we found there were a number of unlicensed premises in the road where someone then applied. So it's just not that fair and level playing field at the moment. It's something that we're going to be highlighting, but it was one of those things that came to us in COVID, because the government's light touch approach and wanted to get everyone outside so they could socially distance, but actually in practice we're not quite happy with that area.
Can you just clarify something?
Yeah.
So I've got an interest in, I've got a pub, I'm a licensee,
Yeah.
and I've got a payment licence. Well, that was dealt with Devon County Council, or I used to have to go to Exeter.
That's right. Yeah.
But now you're saying you
There's two.
issue licences.
Yeah, there's two areas of issue now. So you've got the Highway Authority issuing them under the Highway Act,
Yes.
Section 115, and then the District Council that will issue them under the Business and Planning Act. And it was meant to be for a year and a succinct period of a year, and they've kept extending it. And now we've got a position where it's going to end allegedly September 2023. So if you wanted to apply for a licence now, we couldn't guarantee a licence beyond that period, but it's a faster process because there are only 5 days consultation and 5 days to issue the licence. So it's a 10-day turnaround. It's quite tight.
So it's not automatically renewed what we have.
It wouldn't renew or affect anything in terms of the 115. It's totally separate, and you could end up having 2 licenses from 2 regimes for the same premises. It's very, very diverse. Yeah. And the other issue with it is it was so poorly drafted that when it came in, I spotted that it didn't override the police and antisocial behaviour provisions of 2014, that the PSPO. And so you get people applying for a pavement licence in the PSPO area, and it doesn't override those provisions. So the persons that would drink alcohol in that area would be actually infringing the PSPO. And obviously we've made that highly clear on the website and the application, and they tick a box to say, yeah, we acknowledge that, but they still sometimes make application and we can't refuse it on that basis. So yeah, it's not with problems in that area, and hopefully it will just yes.
Kate, just which is the best way of reporting anything that you feel is not, you know, like extending table and chairs further out into the highway?
Yes.
Is it best to take a photo and then, because obviously weekends and that, you're not on the end of a phone.
No.
Which is the best way to contact you, or would you suggest taking a photo?
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to take a photo, but if someone's passing, and like with any alleged contravention, anything that you're concerned over, a photo is always really useful for the licensing team, but we've just got a standard address, licensing@northdevon.gov.uk, and you can email in. Or if you want to ring us, then you can ring us.
Just so many times I see like wheelchair users not, having to maneuver around, or they, premises have just gone a little bit further out into the
It
highway.
may not be
Or
us
they've
as a
put
district
boards out
council.
there.
Yeah,
and
that
yeah.
wouldn't be something we cover. We don't
No.
cover A-boards. We do cover the pavement licensing, but what I'm trying to get at is that it might not be the district council's pavement licence, it might be counties. And if it is counties, we can't enforce. So I'd love to go both sides of the street up the road and deal with someone that,
Well, it's a nightmare out there
in a uniform
sometimes.
way, but we cannot do that.
Can I just interject there a little bit as well? But certainly in terms of Barnstaple Town Centre.
Yeah, I didn't want to pick one
No,
town, but obviously I really.
No, but in terms of
Yeah.
Barnstaple, the town council has employed a town centre ranger. And one of his jobs, as well as, scraping off stickers and getting rid of graffiti and that kind of thing, one of these is to work with businesses in terms of things like street furniture, as well. So you could always, if you see, Tim in town, you can always, go up to him and mention it, and he can go and deal with it.
It's just there's one area which is Brooklands Road that have obviously got table and chairs out, but they forget at 4 o'clock when it's an open road to bring the table and chairs in. So you're going up Butcher's Row and we're having to go and walk, pedestrians going out in the street because they've still got the table. It is a bit of a minefield out there, it really is.
And from a regulatory sort of capacity perspective, like we talk about weekends and out of hours, then that is quite an undertaking because we've got, 2,000 odd applications that would probably come to us per annum, and our sort of workloads are really high based on our sort of capacity. So that's the other issue.
And I think it's great to have table and chairs out and eating out. I think that's wonderful. But you've got to cater for your pedestrians and
there's that fine balance in there. But what I would say is that I'll keep the committee updated as to what's happening with that piece of legislation and where things are going, because things will start kind of coming to the surface now as to where that's going, because obviously September is that end date in terms of the licences that we're issuing under that what was thought to be a temporary exemption. Taxi, if you click on there, that's got all of our information on how to become a taxi driver, and it also has got information for passengers. So it's got our fare tariff there, what to look for, what our plates look like, what happens to do if they have, what to do if they have a complaint or they want to find out perhaps where something that they'd left in the car would be taken to in terms of lost property, and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of information there. From the taxi perspective, Tim alluded to the fact that we've had some Safer Streets funding, and we have done some mystery shopping exercise in the last 6 months, and that revealed some really good results, and generally a really very polite, courteous service provided by our taxi drivers, no overcharging, no vehicles that were switching their meters on and things like that. So that was really positive. Obviously, to the converse of that, we've had these 9 drivers where we have revoked licences, and we've been taking reports of driver taking particularly seriously. And at the last committee that we had, we looked at a drug policy in terms of testing of our taxi drivers. That's something that's shortly to go out to consultation. We didn't want to really put that with the elections and so on, but that will go out now for consultation with the trade to get any feedback, and then that would get brought back to the committee to have a discussion again to look at the feedback that taxi drivers have made before it then goes on. So this committee acts as kind of the eyes and ears almost then for strategy and resources, and that policy will then get furnished to them with the backing of the committee here in terms of what they propose in terms of a way forward. So that's generally how it works. There are some areas where the committee obviously has the power to take action, and that would be by way of subcommittee largely. So we split 15 of you up into 3 people, and we sit at a subcommittee, and you will hear things like applications, premises, you'll hear applications for the taxi driver licenses where someone perhaps doesn't satisfy the policy. There's a question over fitness and propriety. I'm sure you covered that quite to a great extent in your training as to that. It's very important fit and proper test. And we've got a role here, not only in public safety, but there's people's livelihoods at stake. So these are really very important decisions the council makes. And if there are any queries on any of this, then happy to kind of meet with any of you separately. Right, so that's taxis. Just looking back to the main page. We've got all the stuff pertaining to animal licenses that I talked about. Legislation split in 3 ways on animals. So you've got dangerous wild animal and zoos. Don't have any DWA keepers at the moment. We used to have 1 premises keeping wolves, but they no longer do so. Zoos, we have 3. We've got Ilfracombe Aquarium, Carmarthen Wildlife, Dinosaur Park and Exmoor Zoo. The thrust of the legislation under the Zoo Licensing Act of 81 is massively into conservation and education measures, and that's a really important part of the inspection. Very onerous bit of legislation. The inspection that is undertaken at these zoos is alongside the Secretary of State, appointed inspectors, and ordinarily 2 of those, plus the zoo's vet, plus our vet. It is heavy, it is expensive, and there are no stones unturned. It is a very, very thorough process. So that's a really interesting area to be involved with in terms of the zoo licensing. You won't tend to hear much about them other than approving the animal policy. So the question there, Councillor.
Just a quick question. How often does that happen for those licenses?
Yeah, so a grant application for a zoo licence, the first ever licence is for 4 years, and I believe it's 6 years thereafter. And then the periodic inspection is in the first and third year of the licence, and every year there's also an informal inspection of the zoo by the council's inspector, which will be myself or Phil. So yeah, the inspection every year in addition to that.
It's like a light touch.
Yes, yeah. And if there are any issues coming to light in the intervening period, we can call in a special inspection if that is required. So yeah, it's very prescriptive in terms of those periods of when the inspection is and how those inspectors are appointed and so on. The other area is the animal welfare licenses, which were covered earlier, so kind of boarding, breeding, pet shops and so on. And that legislation changed in 2018, and that was a really massive change for us as a council, because prior to that, the star rating system didn't exist. And the exhibiting animals used to be dealt with by county councils, so that came over to us in 2018. So there's a lot of change there. That's animals. Gambling I touched upon. So all the applications, again, gambling, are on this page. Those transfers, variations to licenses, our policy, gambling, instead of it being called a temporary event notice, it's called a TUN or an OUN, and there for the activities there. They are temporary, the temporary involvement. We cover small society lotteries under gambling as well. We've launched a new bookings page, which has been really successful. By way of the Safer Streets funding, we also implemented a necessity for taxi drivers to do some safeguarding training, and some of you here have sat on that and some nods there, and that has been really useful. It was done by ex-police officer and covers things like child sexual exploitation. It's very much tailored to taxi drivers, what to do if they heard something in the taxi, who would they report that to, how would they deal with that? And she's very, very good. We've nearly got all our taxi drivers through following the mandation. I think we've got 2 or 3 that are being a little bit belligerent. So you might see them coming through as a disciplinary through one of the subcommittees I've seen, and then to take any stance on what to do with them. If we can't get them through, they're on the last card, what is it, yellow or red? Yeah, so they've been warned. Right. Meter tests, every taxi.
Yeah, just a quick one on that. Sorry, Katie.
That's right.
Just on that one, I don't know, maybe I certainly attended that training session. Found it really useful, and I would urge again, if possible, can all the new, well, I mean, I would suggest all councillors attend it, but certainly the councillors on this.
Yeah.
It's very useful for your own knowledge of what to look out for and what,
Yeah.
because, you know, there's people.
Couple of dates. If you go to the bookings page and then you click on driver safeguarding training available, yeah.
It's free.
Yeah, we made it free. We've got 2 to 3 sessions left, I think. So if you press select, you can see the dates. We've got one on the 3rd of July and one on the 28th of September. So if members wanted to do that, you can do your own booking. You literally select the date, press continue, and then you'll enter your details. You can just sign up there to do that. But if you'd like to do it, and I would echo what Frank has said there, it'd be really useful to really get an understanding of what we get past the taxi drivers to do.
Is it specific to taxi drivers?
It is specific to taxi drivers, yeah. It's very much tailored to them in a really good way, rather than it being a high level kind of umbrella kind of level. This is very specific to them. What do they do if they see something, hear something, have a level of concern? What does that concern look like? And there's some really very powerful videos actually on there that she shows, and it really raises the profile of things like child sexual exploitation.
Is it mandatory for taxi drivers?
Yes, so
it is.
Yeah, we've made it mandatory. It wasn't, but the funding that we had through the Safer Streets fund enabled us to mandate that, and we used part of that funding to utilise this trainer. So eventually, when the funding ends, I think we've got 2 sessions left that are free. After that, the taxi drivers will have to pay, but it's a nominal fee. It would be something like £10, I believe, that we approved. So it's not particularly expensive, but they will have to pay, and it is mandatory. I think they've got a time period. If they come on board as a new licence holder, they've got a time period in which to do that training within, which is one of the conditions on their licence. The other area of booking available on here is meter tests. So in the taxis, they obviously have to have a meter, and we then test that meter to ensure that it doesn't clock over and charge an incorrect amount after a certain period of time or distance. We go from down the bottom here, Sanders Yard, and we luckily changed it because it used to be 3/4 mile, but I've reduced it back to half a mile. I can just get half a mile in and stop by the top tree as you go out on the junction, and then we just literally see where that meter clocks over, and if it's working correctly, and if the time of day to right, and all the basics within it, and that's something that they can make a booking for now through this system, and it's really freed up officer time. Actually, it's been really good. Okay. Anything else?
Can I just ask a question about animal licensing?
Yes.
Is the dog warden under your control?
No, I don't know the dog warden. No,
Right.
just the licensing side of things. But at the same time, we do work alongside the dog warden. So I think last week we applied for a warrant in the court to go to a place where we knew wasn't licensed and should be. And we will call upon the dog warden to give us a little hand if we needed to check microchips and things like that. So we're definitely working alongside the dog warden. We had a really good case in court for unlicensed dog breeder back, what date was it? It was the end of last year, wasn't it? November. And it really showed the interest of the local magistrates, because sometimes we've been to court with some of our areas of work, environmental health, and we've never managed to secure massive funds, but it was over £10,000, wasn't it? Through the hard work of Hannah and Noel. And that was a really,
I think I know about this.
yeah, it's a really great message for the people without the licence out there, because clearly we can't regulate everyone, but that sends that message out there. So that was a really good case, and I know that Noel's working on another one that's unlicensed, but we do periodically get those types of complaints. And I think with COVID, that popularity, a bit like the tattooing gaining kind of that surge, we saw a massive surge with obviously the dog sales, and people were making quite a large amount of money from puppies. So a really important area, something that the magistrates have clearly taken an interest in. Other minor, I say minor areas, other smaller areas of aren't so well populated in terms of numbers would be skin piercers, scrap metal, boats I've discussed, sex establishments, and street trading. We don't do a street trading licence, we have prohibited streets, so there's a number of prohibited streets in Barnstaple in the town centre, and that's the only place that we have them. Caravan and camping, that's a big area. Obviously we are a tourist economy and a coastal one, and with that comes tented sites, caravan sites, static caravans, and we've got probably around 12 residential sites, I believe, in the district, and they will come under the council. We issue licences which have various conditions that come from model standards, and we also work with our health and safety colleagues on some issues that may fall outside of those conditions, so things like gas safety. If they had a swimming pool there, obviously that would be regulated by our colleagues. And we have a public register there of those establishments, and we have a fit and proper person register. So here we go, and sites and site rules that we deposit for those caravan parks in the district, which are listed there. Fit and proper persons is a new register. There's a new piece of legislation that came into effect in 2020. Yes, 2020. And a little bit like taxi driving, there's that onus on that individual that's running the caravan site to be a fit and proper person. You click on the register and that would be all the fit and proper people that are affiliated with the different sites. And the legislation is quite prescriptive on what they need to provide the authority. And that's solely for the mobile homes act, so the permanent residential sites, that there's this fit and proper person test, and then the register. I think that's nearly covered the whole of licensing. The one area you won't see on there is HMOs. The council does license HMOs. It tends to be dealt with through Strategy and Resources Committee. We just recently approved new amenity standards for houses in multiple occupancy, and there's been a lot of work surrounding that that's been done to totally overhaul the website and to totally overhaul those amenity standards as part of an ongoing programme of work. So it doesn't tend to come to this committee because it falls outside of the team of people I just spoke to. There's a lady that does that with me called Patricia Brown as well. So if the queries pertaining to that, we've got a different email box, and that is HMO@North So to direct queries there. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the website, but I hope that's useful just to give you some context as to what's on there. it's actually quite helpful to kind of read through a guidance note to get it through in your own mind sometimes if you've got a comment from somebody or whatever. In terms of questions, always at the end of the phone or an email. If you've got anything that you're not too sure about, then I just contact me. I do work part time. I work Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. My colleagues are part time also. But you always get someone by that licence in the box. With the subcommittees, Oriana is very useful at sort of guiding people through as to the expectation and what to do. The first one's always kind of slightly more daunting, but what we've done in terms of the appointment, in terms of the proposal, is to kind of mix up some of the older members, I think, with the newer members so we've got that level of experience, because that's really helpful. And I think that's your next item, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Any other queries? It's a bit of a whirlwind of information.
Yeah, and we just thank you because I found it really interesting. It was very well. It was right, obviously through the chair, but as I say, I've obviously, like John, got a brief idea of licensing, being a personal license holder, but to actually sit here and go through it.
There's a lot of areas.
Yeah, there is, yeah. So I must admit, I do go onto the site, but I didn't actually look at it in such detail.
Yeah.
And I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
Very informative.
Oh, that's very kind. I mean, there's lots of new legislation that keeps coming. There seems to be lots of extra layers of checks that keep coming. Only 27th of April, we just had to make sure we signed up to something called the NR3S, which is a national system of database for taxi drivers, where other local authorities can record suspensions or revocation of licences. Then we're now obliged to check that register to see whether there are refusals elsewhere. So things are evolving, and it's definitely getting better and more robust all the time. But at the same time, some of the legislation, it is worth saying, is still a bit archaic. The Town Police Clause is at 1847. It's like translating kind of age-old legislation into a modern era. So Hannah's work out sometimes.
So you're trying to keep one step ahead of the loopholes, isn't it, as well?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. But no, it's a really interesting area, and because it's so diverse, we struggle sometimes to keep up with bits and pieces. But we do try. We'll try and keep you updated. So when we do get committee meetings, if there are things bubbling away in the background or news about things, we do try and keep you updated. We do a taxi driver newsletter as well, and so that's contained on the website under their information, and we email that out now. We never previously had the emails for all these drivers, but we've now mandated that as well, so it makes our communication with them a lot easier. But we keep all the back editions on the website, so if you wanted a bit of a flavour about what we've been talking about, you can view those there.
I think that relationship comes through when there's like consultations. You get quite good response, don't you?
Yeah,
it's always worth keeping those communications open.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. That's really informative, and glad to see that the policies that we have are spread out through the 4 years. They're not all coming at us at one point, are they? So that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Right. Any further questions? We move on. No. Okay. Item 8 then, alternative arrangements for the appointment of subcommittees 2023, pages 9 to 16. Right, what do we want to do with this one, Oriana?
Well, in Adam's absence, I can outline what it is. Hopefully it's quite self-explanatory. Basically, yes, the 15 of you are split into groups of 3. We don't actually allocate who's the chair anymore. We used to previously stipulate who was chair of the committees. So we've got subcommittees A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
There's no importance linked to those, titles, but basically you then are called upon to sit and do hearings, as Katie alluded to. So for taxi drivers or premises solicitors, it can be a case where if you're up on a committee, say A, but the hearing is for something that's in your ward, you might want to excuse yourself from that committee. So if you can, at the earliest point, let me know, and then I can find a substitute. Basically, I've prescribed who the committees are allocated by, but if you want to change anything, now's the time to do that.
Yeah.
On another note, Tim mentioned the Crime and Disorder Committee. That is all of you, it's made up of the whole committee, but if you wished to make it a smaller subcommittee, you could. I think we had issues with quorum. That's why it became the whole committee, to allow for the fact that we didn't always have enough numbers. It used to be a smaller group, but I think you're all Crime and Disorder Subcommittee, and in November we get together with Torridge's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. 2 meetings are run at the same time, and we sit and grill Toby on work that they've done. I think we probably all want to be part of it. So everyone sort of forgets about that, and I wanted to bring it up now because I think we missed it in that last time, and everyone was like, oh, what's this? But so that'll be happening in November, and I think, is it our turn to go to Torridge this year?
I think so.
They came to us today, yeah.
We might be attached down for that this year.
As long as they put us a nice tea coffee, I don't mind.
I would say, occasionally.
No, I'm joking.
So has everyone had a chance to see the list of the subcommittees? Any questions or issues with that? Councillor Beedham?
Just an observation, Chairman, I'm happy to do the recommendation. Just that, I mean, obviously impossible to get this with one returning member and.
There's only 4 of you.
So I was just worried about subcommittee, whether it would be wise to substitute somebody, one of the more experienced into their first.
We can always do that as me. I've been
It's just
advised
that
that Councillor North's got quite a good background, so that's why I put him there.
Fair enough. Then. Yeah, I mean, I just remember, I still feel as we regret sometimes for something like say.
Absolutely, case by case, legal will advise Katie likewise on what type of case we're dealing with and what sort of experience we might need. And it might be, I mean, these are very flexible.
I mean, some committees are drinking.
The committees are very prescriptive. They're very prescriptive. There's an order of operations going through the agenda. You know, we get support all along the way, so it's really well run. No scary, no. Right.
Chair, can I?
Yes, sure.
How do you publish the dates of the crime committee? Is it just on this of?
You'll notice there is only the one a year. It tends to be around November, but it's not been set at a council meeting where it's going to be this date. It's a bit fluid, so we have to go on Toby's availability. And actually, Torridge will lead on that. As soon as I do know, I will make sure the committee are aware.
And the second part was these subcommittees. Do you try to coordinate dates with the relevant panel members?
Oh, planning.
Or are these set? I mean, we got this.
Yeah.
Licensing and planning are very
Licensing,
separate.
The A to F subcommittees. Are dates penciled in during the year for us to sort of attend these meetings?
They arise as and when on a
Yes.
case by case situation, so we don't know when they're going to be. They tend to all come at once.
And
The driver's done something naughty.
yeah, it's quite, yeah. And what's the time do we need to get, you know, what's the window of us having to sit and review? Is availability of people is probably hard to get hold of.
Yeah, so it's very prescribed.
Right.
So under the Licence Act, by way of example, so if you had a premises licence application, there's a period of 28 days for representations to be received. If one of those representations comes in within that period, then there's a period of time then that the council have legally to then determine that application within the 28 days. So there's like a 56-day sort of window for us, but we would only know perhaps on the last day that a representation came in. We might only know on the 28th day. So things can be quite a swift turnaround, particularly on the last day representation. And sometimes we'll organise a committee. My officers will be writing a report. We'll spend a whole day writing a report, and then they'll mediate
And that whole day was totally wasted. And that is just the power of the board, unfortunately, you know.
Thank you.
Can I just say, through Chair, it's normally flexible, so if, you can't get that exact committee, Ariana normally puts it out, and,
Yeah.
you know, so I wasn't there. So it's not set in stone,
Yeah, that's fine.
that's the three.
And I appreciate Cat always gives you a very long window of notice of when we
Yeah.
might have to call upon you. So it could be we have to ask a substitute member. So I'm sorry, we can't be really very more, it's a bit
No,
vague,
that's
isn't
fine.
it? But it's a bit,
It is very
Just
flexible.
got, just got.
You got it?
Yeah, Chair, I don't know how, I mean, obviously, North Devon's a very small place, or something. I don't know whether, Katie wants to explain about how interested you are to then not be involved, i.e. your regular taxi drivers being caught doing 50 miles an hour and 30 for the third time a week. You know, whether you should be appropriate for you to sit on the committee.
Are you happy to?
Yeah, so Chair, if we could explain, so if you have an interest, if there's a potential conflict of interest, you have to declare it, and it may be appropriate that you don't sit on that subcommittee if you have an interest. So if it was a premises licence review, or if it was a taxi driver with whom you use regularly or have an association, then that would be an appropriate time to opt out of not being on that subcommittee. Is that what you're trying to get at? Yeah. Thank you.
Just on that useful. It's useful you declaring before the day of the meeting, just obviously against that, get us that to.
How are we going to look at the substitute issue? Because obviously somebody does turn up and then there's a witness that we know, that person steps back and says, I can't be at this hearing. How do we get over that? Because then you're left with two, because we used to have three and then a substitute. So if somebody turns up that is known to you and you say, well, I can't do this hearing, are we going to stick with it just being the three and then chances are that it couldn't go ahead?
we'd have to adjourn, Chair, if I may. I believe we could adjourn to get someone in place. I think we moved away from having had to have a sub because
Yeah.
it was a waste of time for that person to come in, just told you not need to go again. So we did move away from that. We've not had a situation where we've had to call on one. Touch wood, it won't happen, but if it does, I believe we're allowed to adjourn to get someone to come. Again, most people are quite local and can hopefully step in. If not, I don't actually know.
It comes back to making sure you've read your papers to check that they.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes the witness just appears.
I don't know about that
Well,
situation,
I don't know.
Hannah. That would be something.
No, the witnesses should always be prescriptive, so, and if you're talking about members of the public, then, it depends on whether it's part B or part A, but that wouldn't be, they wouldn't be party to the proceedings, so that wouldn't be a conflict. But you should be able to glean from the papers whether there's gonna be a conflict, and therefore opt out. But if it was the situation where it was the day of the review hearing and, I don't know, you were ill or you realised or you've been contacted or lobbied by somebody involved with it, or you wanted to declare you're out and it was the morning, we can adjourn, or we can ask the party who has been reviewed whether they're prepared to go ahead, or if they're legally represented, we can ask them if they want to go ahead with two. But that is really not ideal at all. No. And if I can just also, while I'm talking, Chair, just say to you that unfortunately there have been now 2 incidents where our review hearing decision has been appealed, requiring therefore that you do come to court and possibly repeat whatever your reasons were and explain to the bench, the magistrates, why you would have been making the decision that you made and the reasons for doing so. And so it's important that on that review hearing, the reasons are set out very clearly and justified. Okay?
And maybe, yeah, when we start getting into them, that whole process is explained, isn't it? So it's fresh in your mind when you actually come to do
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so we come to recommendations then in section 2 of the report. Do I have a proposer for those? Councillor Beedham and seconder, Councillor Hunt, and all those in favour, please show.
Thank you so much.
Unanimous, thank you. Right then, item 9. Licensing and Community Safety Subcommittee, you've got the minutes attached. They pages 17 to 42. I'm proposing to take those on block if that's okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. All those in favour? Okay, and are we in favour of agreeing those minutes, please?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, all in favour, please show. Any abstentions?
Was it theirs?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, right, that's okay.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right, that's it then, is it folks? Okay, I'll declare the meeting closed then. Thank you very much.